missed it. And we're going to get into it. So ladies and gentlemen, my reason for doing this webinar, if you would, is because as a person who is a mentor in this industry and wants to lead people the correct way of being able to collect all of their royalties and understand that as an artist, you can make a living off this, I wanted to make sure that you all know who the MLC are, what they stand for, and how they help artists. Now, being that the MLC is one of kind of the newest companies for collection agencies that are around, a lot of people do not know about this company. And if that means if you do not know about it, you do not know how to collect your royalties. So I would like to take some time to introduce you all to Miss Serona Elton, who is from the MLC and who is an amazing educator and just advocate for everybody in the industry. And today she's going to have a great presentation about the MLC and hopefully answer some questions that you all may have regarding how to collect your mechanical royalties. Miss Serona, it's on you.
All right, so it is my pleasure to be here. We love working with you on these sessions, so thank you for having us back. It's great to meet all of you. So my name is Serona Elton. I am the head of educational partnerships at the MLC. I'm also actually a professor at the University of Miami, down in Miami, Florida, where I teach music industry. I'm actually on the phone on my headset, which is separate than the video on my computer, because my video on my computer sometimes gets slow and choppy, whereas this way my audio is going to stay good and clear and not choppy at all. So forgive me if at any time my mouth and my audio start like not looking like they line up, but don't worry, it's more important that you listen than you watch, honestly. So it's my pleasure to be here with you. So this is a confusing topic. Let me just start by saying that, right? It is confusing. So it can take, hearing this a couple times before it all clicks, all right, in your brain. And so what we have found over time when we try to explain it is it's often good to use some visual aids, some like images first, to do a presentation with some graphics that help kind of simplify it a bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with a couple of presentation slides, but at some point we will come out of those slides and take questions, okay? And make sure, remember to keep your own sound on mute while we do this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and take you through a couple slides and be thinking about your questions. You can drop your questions in the chat. And then once I finish the presentation, I'm going to go back up the chat and look and see what questions we might have missed. Okay. All right. And let's see, let me share the screen. And here we go. Okay. All right. So hopefully y'all can see that. Let me just get the screen to move. It's not responding to me, so stand by a second while there we go. Okay, now it wants to move like 5 times. Hold on. This is why computers, man, they just like to mess with you. All right. So at the highest, like just boil it down to me really simple, give to me in a nutshell, what is the MLC? So the MLC is a brand new nonprofit organization created for a very specific purpose. We are here to collect a particular kind of music royalties called digital mechanical royalties. We're going to talk more about that in a minute, but to collect digital mechanical royalties from certain types of digital music providers like Spotify and Apple Music, but not all of them, only certain types. I'll talk about which ones in a minute. Certain types of digital music providers pay this kind of money to the MLC, and then the MLC pays this money out to rights holders. And ultimately, in a nutshell, we pay the party that is, we call administering the publishing, basically handling the business of the music publishing. And so in some cases, that means that we are paying songwriters directly if they're handling all their own music business publishing, right? Music publishing business. But in some cases, it means we're paying your publishing administrator. Like I saw one of you mentioned in the chat that you're with Songtrust. We pay Songtrust, Songtrust pays you. So we're going to unpack all of that in great detail. But at a nutshell, our reason for existing is to collect this kind of money from digital music services and pay this money out to certain kinds of rights holders. And for the most part, this money is flowing through us, either directly to you or to somebody collecting on your behalf if you are a songwriter, okay? All right, so now let's unpack that. Like, let's break down each of these little pieces. First thing, we got to make sure we understand the basics. or else the conversation gets really, even more confusing. We have to make sure everybody clearly understands in their mind the difference between a song and a composition on one hand and a recording on the other hand. They're not the same thing. Even though often we create new music, you think of it and you're making it right then and there, capturing it as it's coming into your head. When we listen to sound recordings, there's actually 2 copyrights involved. And that's frankly part of why the music business is complicated, is because of this 2 copyright situation, or what I call nested copyrights. You have the song or the composition. I use those terms interchangeably. The copyright law calls these musical works, and they are created by songwriters and composers and lyricists, usually administered by music publishers, like that they handle the business of musical works. And here we're talking about the melody or the rhythm, the harmony, the lyrics. That's what we mean by a musical work. So really famous song, you might have heard of it, called Yesterday. It was written by 2 really famous songwriters, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Keep that in mind, because we're going to build on that example. That is a separate copyrightable work from the sound recording, right? So the copyright law calls them sound recordings. They might be of music, which is what we're talking about. They could also be like a podcast is a sound recording, an audiobook is a sound recording, but we're talking about sound recordings of musical works here, right? We have this nesting situation where you have a musical work and then you make a sound recording of it. And that sound recording, it's like the musical work is nested within it. And so sound recordings are created by recording artists, producers, right? Typically distributed by record companies. And by the way, a sound recording is a separate work from the video. So let's say you have a music video, you actually have 3 copyrighted works in that music video. 3 nests happening. You have the audio visual work that is the video. Within that is the sound recording, and within the sound recording is the musical work, right? That's why it's so confusing, this nesting of copyrights. So a video is a separate thing altogether as well that might have a sound recording and a musical work embedded within it. So building on that example, that song Yesterday, it was first recorded by a musical act called The Beatles. Maybe you've heard of them. But then that same musical work was recorded by Aretha Franklin, Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, and like hundreds, if not thousands, of other artists have all recorded. We like to call them a cover. They've all made a recording, a cover recording, as in after the Beatles, everybody else's records we call like a cover of. They've all made a recording of that same musical work. And so you can also start to understand this kind of like one-to-many relationship, right? So in my example there, you've got that one song by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and it was recorded by the Beatles, Aretha, Elvis, Frank Sinatra, and like a whole bunch of other people, right? All these sound recordings get matched up. They all get pointed back to, linked to that one original musical work, okay? So got to make sure we understand musical works are separate from sound recordings, even though some of you may both be the person writing the musical work and making the recording, right? Maybe you do all of it yourself. You're just wearing a lot of different hats, but they are different hats. Okay, so that's one basic thing we have to get out of the way. The other thing we have to understand from a basics perspective is a little bit about copyright law. So when you own the copyright in a musical work, or a sound recording, or an audiovisual work, when you own that copyright, what that means as to be a copyright owner is that the law grants you a set of what's called exclusive rights. It means these are things that basically are yours to decide. That's what ownership means. It's like ownership equals control, okay? So if you are the owner of a musical work copyright, okay, you are, the law grants you a set of rights. Each of those rights, you can actually kind of draw a line and relate it to the kinds of ways we consume music, because all the different ways we consume music involve touching on those rights. So, and some of the terminology in the music industry is talking specifically about certain rights and not others. So from a terminology perspective, when we talk about mechanical licensing and mechanical royalties, that term mechanical in the music business in the US, what we are talking about is the permission needed and the royalties paid To reproduce is one of those exclusive rights, basically means copy, and distribute, which means make available to the public, right? To reproduce and distribute a song as a sound recording. Okay, so when we're talking about mechanicals, that's what we're talking about. The permission to reproduce and distribute a musical work into a sound recording, and then basically have that sound recording be available on physical records or digital records, digital services. That's a separate set of rights than something else called public performance, which is a different right. It's one of those rights that a musical works owner has, the right to control public performances of the work. And when we talk about public performances, then we're talking about a performance license. So ultimately, you could draw out like a map of the different terminology we use in the music industry, say, well, what rights is that terminology talking about? And when we're talking about mechanical licensing, mechanical royalties, we're talking, that connects back to the right to reproduce and distribute musical works in sound recordings. Building on that a little more, in the music industry, when do we need these mechanical licenses and when do we have to pay mechanical royalties? What is this? Okay, so what has been the case for a long, long time, more than 100 years, was mechanical licenses were and still are needed in order to put out physical records. It's typically the record label's responsibility to secure a mechanical license and pay a mechanical royalty if they're going to distribute vinyl records or CDs, okay? That's still the case. That hasn't changed. Fast forward a little bit in the timeline, we got to permanent downloads. You remember those? Remember iTunes? I swear I have a whole drawer full of like every kind of old iPod, MP3 player ever. One day I think I'll donate it to a museum or something. So good old downloads, okay? When downloads first came around, those need mechanical license and mechanical royalties. The way we handle digital download mechanical licensing in the United States is that typically the record label that was already putting out physical products and already had to get a mechanical for the physical products, the record label also secures the mechanical license for the downloads. That became common practice in the United States. I will say, if any of you are familiar with other countries, in other countries, the Digital Music Service had to secure that, okay? But in the US, that's the model we've always followed. And that is generally the model still being followed, although the law allows for a slightly different approach. We'll talk about it in a second. So downloads need a mechanical. And now, fast forward to today, we now are enjoying music, consuming music in a new way, newish way, called interactive streaming and limited downloads, which really are there to support interactive streaming. So let's talk about what we mean by interactive streaming. You might have thought like streaming is streaming, but actually there's different kinds of streaming. And once you're a music industry insider, you need to know the difference between different kinds of streaming. And the reason you need to know the difference is because they follow different licensing models and the money follows a different path. That's why you care. So interactive streaming is where you as the user on Spotify or Apple Music, let's say, you get to go and find your favorite recording and press play. You as the user are in charge of what you're listening to. That's what makes it interactive. It's the end user is in control of what they're listening to. That's different than non-interactive streaming, which is like digital radio. That's like Pandora Radio, iHeartRadio, SiriusXM satellite radio. You can pick the station, you can pick the channel, you can pick the playlist, but you can't pick exactly what recording you're listening to, right? That's called non-interactive streaming, and it follows a different licensing model. Interactive streaming, sometimes that's also called on-demand streaming because you get to pick exactly what you want to hear, right? You're in control, complete control. You can press a repeat 30 times if you want to, because I've done that before, my favorite track, I'm just saying. Interactive streaming involves a mechanical license and mechanical royalties. Non-interactive streaming does not. Non-interactive streaming is considered to be only a performance, not also a reproduction and distribution. There's no mechanical involved in non-interactive streaming. Interactive streaming as a mechanical, Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora Premium. Did you know Pandora has a version of a service that you can pay for and you have full interaction, works just like Spotify, which you got to pay different. It's different than the free Pandora radio most of us are more familiar with. And Amazon Music has a paid subscription on-demand version as well, interactive streaming. Limited downloads really is something just the lawyers need to worry about. If you're listening to like Spotify and let's say you're going to take a flight across the country and you don't want to pay Wi-Fi on the airplane, right? Because I swear that just gets more expensive every month, it seems. And you're like, yo, how do I listen to my music on the flight if I'm not going to pay for Wi-Fi? Well, what you might have noticed, there's usually a button on your playlist and Spotify where you can click that button to say, I want this available for offline listening. And what that means is you want to be able to stream even when your device is not connected to the internet. So how is that actually happening, right? Have you ever thought about that? Like, how does a stream happen if my device is not connected to anything? Well, it's because actually what happens in the background is you have to have done that before you lose your connection. That music gets downloaded to your device. And it sits there on your device so you can stream it. But it doesn't behave like a permanent download, right? It's not like yours forever. You can't move it from device to device, right? It's just done to enable you to stream when you're not connected. So technically the law lumps that like limited download stuff under the interactive streaming because it's kind of like, it's like an enabling technology that you don't even know what's happening in the background, okay? So physical records, permanent downloads, interactive streams and limited downloads all require mechanical licenses, all create mechanical royalties, but the money from these different buckets flows slightly differently. Record labels pay music publishers their mechanicals for physical products. Generally speaking, we still follow the model where record labels secure the mechanical license for downloads and pay that money to the publishers. If any of you have ever recorded a cover, so recorded a song somebody else, not you, wrote, and then you went to like distribute that through DistroKid would have probably told you you need to secure a download mechanical license. You might have had to prepay some amount of money for that. That's because it's really on the record label, and if you know you're an independent artist, it's on you to secure the download mechanical. But interactive streams and limited downloads, that now works differently, and that's where the MLC comes into play. So there's this diagram on our website. I'm not going to take time here because it would just suck up all the time, but the diagram is on the website. There's also a little animated video that explains it and a link to a 30-minute podcast webcast where I went through this in great detail. The key to understanding this diagram, the point of this diagram is people were asking us a lot, like, so, okay, I've heard of other organizations, like I've heard of ASCAP and BMI, I've heard of Sound Exchange, you know, there's DistroKid, there's TuneCore, so like, where do you fit into the mix with all this? Like, I don't understand. So we kind of created like it's like meant to be a bit of a landscape slide image. And let me tell you how you can read it without getting into it, okay? The key is this little legend at the bottom. I know it's really small. It's bigger on our website. And what this legend is telling you is that what this diagram shows is the 4 types of royalties generated when digital music is used, from interactive streams and limited downloads, permanent downloads, and non-interactive streams. It shows for those 4 types of uses. That's what you have down here in the legend. The first row is interactive streams, limited downloads. The second is permanent downloads. The third is non-interactive streams. For those kinds of uses of music, one or more of these 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are royalties that are generated. So right off the bat, just understand this. For all 4 of those kinds of digital uses, at least 2 kinds of money is being generated every time one of those happens. At least 2. And you can see for the first row there, for limited downloads and interactive streams, 3 sets of royalties are generated. So let me recap that. When you have a stream on Spotify or Apple Music, 3 sets of money, 3 financial transactions are created by that one stream. Let that sink in for a second, okay? So you look at the diagram, look at the legend, it tells you which of those 4 columns are involved. Now, the left half of the screen is all about musical works. That's the publishing side of the business. That's those songs, those compositions. That's money that flows to the publishers and the songwriters and the composers and the lyricists, okay? The right side of the screen, that's the sound recording money, because remember, we're talking about when you're listening to digital music, you've got 2 copyrights involved. So the right half of the screen is money that flows to the people involved in the sound recording, the record label, the recording artist, the producer. I know a lot of producers are also songwriters. Well, then you're on both sides of the screen, okay? So left half is musical works, right half is sound recordings. And then, for example, a stream on Spotify generates 1, 2, and 3. It generates number 1, that's money that goes, so a stream on Spotify is both a public performance and a reproduction and distribution. So what that means is it sends, that's one stream on Spotify, sends public performance royalties to ASCAP and BMI and CSAC. It sends mechanical royalties to the MLC. And it sends record royalties to the record distributor who pays the record label, who pays the artist or the independent artist, okay? So if you are both a songwriter and an artist and you have music on Spotify, you should be getting paid 3 times. 1 through your PRO, 1 through your record distributor, and 1 time where Spotify will pay the MLC, and then the MLC is either going to pay you if you're handling your publishing business, right? If you're self-published or self-administered, as we say, or we're going to pay your publishing administrator, like Songtrust, if you sign up with Songtrust, who will pay you. But don't be missing out on one of those 3 streams of revenue, right? 3 sets of money is created by that 1 stream on Spotify. So this is on our website. You can spend more time with it. If you go to themlc.com, there's a resources option at the top, and then there's a thing that says digital music royalties, and you can take some time with this diagram. So why is the MLC here? Like, I haven't heard of you before. I heard you're new. Why are you here? Okay, we are new. We are definitely new. So we're here because there was a change in the copyright law, the Music Modernization Act of 2018. You might have heard it got a lot of attention in the music industry. It was a big change to the US copyright law. Those don't happen very often. It was a big deal. We call that the MMA. We love our acronyms in this business. Oh boy, do we love our acronyms. Oh my gosh. So here's another one. The MMA created the MLC, right? You know how to speak acronyms. So the Music Modernization Act, that act had like 3 sections in it, 3 different titles that did 3 completely different things. One of those titles was called the Musical Works Modernization Act. And it did 3 really critical things. And these 3 things all changed the way digital mechanical licensing and royalties in the U.S. works, okay? That's what changed, one of the 3 big changes in the law, the one we're talking about today. So the first thing it did was it created a new blanket compulsory license. So let's break that apart for a second, okay? The way mechanical licensing used to work, and it still does work this way for record labels, but the way mechanical licensing used to work for everybody was it followed a licensing model that we call work by work licensing. And what that means is, like today, what record labels do is if you want to now make that song into a recording and distribute that recording, the record label model is they have to research and find out who all the writers are of the song, find out who all their publishers are, and then writer by writer go and get permission or make sure maybe they already have permission in their artist contract. If the artist is a co-writer, they can analyze each piece of it, but they have to analyze writer by writer, share by share, in other words, meaning each co-owner, co-writer of that song, you have to research and find out, what's the status of them? Have they granted permission to, have they granted a mechanical license? If not, you have to go get a license from them. And it's painstaking. You got to do it like writer by writer, right? Or publisher by publisher on a song, work by work licensing. For example, that's how something called synchronization licensing, we're not talking about today, but you might have heard of it, like when a music's going to be in a movie, that's all handled on a work-by-work basis. Like every owner's got to be identified, got to be contacted, got to be asked for a license, right? Work-by-work licensing is very labor-intensive, okay? Contrasting that with blanket licensing. Blanket licensing means that the party that needs a license just gets one license that covers huge amounts of works. For example, when Spotify needs a license from ASCAP, it doesn't go down and get one publisher by publisher. Spotify gets a blanket license from ASCAP. FM radio gets a blanket license from BMI. Okay, that's how those kind of licenses work. Pandora Radio gets a blanket license, granted by the law, but that's what Sound Exchange handles. Those are not done on a work-by-work, permission per permission from each individual owner kind of basis. A service or like a radio station gets one license, and that license includes all the works that central organization or that permission grants them. So the law created this new approach for digital mechanical licensing of a blanket approach, not just a work-by-work approach. And the reason for that is that work-by-work approach was not working well. You might have heard statistics, Spotify gets more than 100,000 new recordings uploaded to Spotify every day. That blows my mind, 100,000 new recordings on Spotify every day. Work-by-work licensing does not work, pun intended, when you have that volume of licensing needed, okay? So the law created this new blanket license for the digital services. Record labels still got to do work-by-work. That hasn't changed. We already had something called a compulsory license for mechanical royalties, which means if certain conditions are met, the law grants the license instead of the copyright owner. It's kind of crazy. We have a couple of exceptions like this in the copyright law where if certain criteria are met, the law steps in the place of the copyright owner and grants the license, okay? And so what we have here, we always had that in place for cover records. Like let's say a record label, let's say that my nice new record label was going to do a cover of Yesterday with my artist. I could, and my normal practice would have been to go and ask for a work-by-work license from each of the publishers of Yesterday, but I always had like plan B under the law where I could instead rely on the law to grant me a license if I followed a whole bunch of procedures, okay? Record labels don't like to do that very often, but digital music services very much need to operate this way. And so Spotify gets one blanket mechanical license that covers all the works that are on its service, and the law grants the license. It does not have to go and negotiate that license. The law says if you meet these criteria, Spotify, you can have a license. So actually the MLC is not granting the license, the law grants the license in this case to digital music service. This license only covers interactive streaming limited downloads, and it can cover permanent downloads. The law allows it. In the US though, everybody's decided to keep the old practice where really the record label is handling the permanent download license. That's allowed, but it could be the case a digital service could decide, I'm going through the MLC for my permanent download license, just they haven't mostly chosen to do that because like there's not that many downloads happening. They've decided they don't want to mess with it. Okay. Whenever you have a blanket license, you need one central or more than one. You need at least one central organization to administer that blanket license. That means to like receive the paperwork from the services and to receive the royalties, match those royalties up to the rights holders and pay that out, right? So that's why like ASCAP and BMI, those are all like, we call collective rights management organizations, or here's another acronym, CMOs. You need a central organization to administer this kind of money whenever you have blanket licenses in place. So the law couldn't just create a blanket license and not also create a new organization to handle that blanket license collections and distribution of the money. So that's why we have the Mechanical Licensing Collective. A really nifty, easy to say name comes from the law. We didn't sit around a room and say, if we called ourselves Mechanical Licensing Collective, like that is such a catchy name. That's not what happened. But we like the MLC for short, but the Mechanical Licensing Collective, the law said there will be created a Mechanical Licensing Collective. The other thing is the law said that the MLC has to maintain a publicly available database of musical works ownership information so everybody can see who is owning or administering the copyrights for those musical works. And it has to be available to the public, like with no logon. Anybody can, read it, read only, anybody can see it. And so that's one of the other critical things that we have done. One other quick thing, because I started this new piece of terminology. This is like brand new. I debuted it last month. I did like a video about copyright that's on like my YouTube channel, and I'm like trying to start a trend with a new phrase. So the MLC is something called a collective management organization. Really should be collective rights management organization, but for some reason the R doesn't get a letter. So it's like CMO for short. And so ASCAP's a CMO, BMI is a CMO, Sound Exchange is CMO. We all are in this kind of collective rights management, but we all manage different kinds of rights. But we all do collective rights management. We're all CMOs. So my new phrase is, are you getting your CMO money? Get it? Like CMO money. And you better have a PRO, you better be getting paid by the MLC, or make sure your publishing administrator is, you better be getting paid from Sound Exchange. Are you missing out on your CMO money? So that's my new thing, CMO money. Anyway, thank you for indulging me with that. All right, so another quick summary of what the MLC does and does not do. The reason we tell people what we don't do is because, again, right, this is confusing. And people are like, wait, are you collecting this for me? And the worst thing would be if you thought we were collecting something for you and we're not, and then you have not gone and gotten that money. Like, that means you're just leaving it on the table. So what do we do as a recap, right? We have this public database of musical works ownership information. We were created to administer this new blanket license, all right? And this blanket license applies only to digital services operating in the United States, that have interactive streams, limited downloads and permanent downloads if they want to go that route. So what do we do like all day, every day? What is like the bulk of our team working on? Here's what they're working on, something called matching. So remember back when I was talking about songs versus sound recordings, and I said you had that one song by John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and then you had the Beatles recording, Aretha Franklin's recording, Elvis Presley's recording, Frank Sinatra's recording, right? All of these different recordings match back to that one musical work, right? That's called matching. And so what happens is every month, the digital services report to us, these recordings were streamed this many times. We have to match those recordings to their related musical work so that the money flows from the recording use to the musical work back to the rights holders. So that matching process of matching sound recording usage information back to its related musical work, that's what we do all day, every day. We use systems, we use people, lots of things to try and be as successful as possible with that. And as part of all that, we're collecting the money, the mechanical royalties from those services for those recordings being used, those songs in the recordings. They pay us the mechanical royalties, and we pay that money out then to our members, the rights holders, essentially the publishing administrators, if you will, of those musical works. And in some cases, if you're a songwriter handling all your own publishing, that means we need to pay you. So what do we not do? We have nothing to do with performance royalties. We do not replace ASCAP or BMI or any of them. If you are a writer, you need to be signed up with a PRO. Full stop. That has not changed. And you need to register your works with them, separate from us. If you, we have nothing to do with sound recordings. So for example, if you're a recording artist, you need to be signed up with Sound Exchange. They don't do what we do don't do what they do. That's totally different, totally separate. Sign up with Sound Exchange, register your sound recordings with Sound Exchange. We have nothing to do with mechanical licensing for physical products. The law does not actually allow us to get involved in mechanicals for physicals. We have nothing to do with video, okay? Video is separate. Video, the digital video involves performance and synchronization. It does not involve a mechanical. We have nothing to do with video. So music that's on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, YouTube in a moving video, nothing to do with the MLC. You got to get that money other ways. And we are not allowed to collect digital mechanicals from outside the United States and bring that money back inside the United States. So we can talk in a little while about the different ways you could collect that money, but it's not allowed by law to flow through the MLC. So you need to think about how you're going to get that money if you're generating mechanical royalties outside the United States. All right, don't worry, we're almost done with the presentation. Public search, anybody can go to our website, top right there, it says public search, and just search to your heart's content. You do not need to log in. Who needs to become a member of the MLC? Okay, music publishers that are doing their own administration need to become a member. Publishing administrators like Songtrust is a member. CD Baby Pro Publishing is a member. TuneCore Publishing, they are all members of the MLC because they are publishing administrators. Okay. There are mechanical CMOs outside the United States based in other countries, and they are also members of the MLC because we pay them for the use of their members' music in the United States, and then they pay their members. So we can pay money out of the US, we just can't bring it back in. So they're all members. And then it depends. Some songwriters, composers, and lyricists need to become members, but not all, right? This is. I've said this now a few times. So yeah, you're like, but she said this already. Yep, because it's confusing. So I'm saying it a few more times, okay? Should you join the MLC if you are a songwriter, composer, or lyricist? It all depends on if you are administering, in other words, handling all the business of your songs. Okay, if you have never signed up with a publisher, never signed up with a publishing administrator ever, like your default position is that you are self-administered. All songwriters start off as self-administered, and that stays the case unless and until you enter into a contract or sign up with an administrator or a publisher. But if you've never done either of those things, then your default position is you are self-administered, which means that you should join the MLC. It is free to join, okay? And you will register your songs with the MLC. It's okay if later on you then do a deal with a publisher or a publishing administrator. It's no problem. We handle that all the time. We can switch in our database to say you are no longer administering those songs. Now your publisher is, or your publishing administrator is. No problem, okay? So maybe you're like, I don't know what I want to do yet. That's fine. You can join the MLC and then switch that later. But all songwriters start off as self-administered until they sign something with somebody else. If, however, you are a writer where you've said, you know what, all my songs go through Songtrust or CD Baby Pro Publishing, that's separate from digital distribution. I'm talking about the publishing service that CD Baby offers. Nothing to do with whether your sound recordings are distributed by CD Baby. That's a different thing that they do, right? Companies like CD Baby and TuneCore realized over time, they primarily would just distribute sound recordings. That was what they did. But they realized over time that a lot of the artists whose sound recordings they were distributing were also writers and needed administration services. So they've expanded their services to also, as an extra option, not a requirement, an extra option you could sign up for is to hire CD Baby Pro Publishing or TuneCore Publishing to handle the publishing administration for you. You don't have to do that, but it's like separate. It's not the same as distribution of your sound recording. But so if you did sign up your songs with a publishing administrator like that, then we pay them and they pay you. You will not also join the MLC and register those works. Don't do that, because then it looks like you're claiming those works and so is your publishing administrator. That looks like a rights conflict, and the works will go on hold until we're clear about who's supposed to be paid, right? So if your works are administered by somebody else, they are the one who will join the MLC and they will collect that money. You can still look them up in the public search, make sure your data's there, that they did the right job for you, right? But you will not need to join the MLC. Membership is free. You just go to our website, connect to collect, fill in the questions and the answers, and you can get signed up really fast. No problem. It's totally free. Once you become a member, though, you're not done. Really, the next thing then is you need to register your songs with the MLC, get them in our database, and there's a couple of tools to help you do that. We can talk about that later, but there's different kinds of tools depending on the way you like to work. You can use our screens, you can upload a spreadsheet, there's a couple of different ways you can go about it. And once you get those songs in our database, another really cool thing you can do is you can look through all of those sound recording usage reports sent to us by services like Spotify, and Apple Music that say, hey, this recording was streamed this many times. If we have not been able to match that sound recording to its related song, and that's a sound recording of your song, you can look through that and tell us, hey, MLC, make sure you match that sound recording because that's sound recording of my song and I don't want you to miss it. So we've given a lot of, tools, power to the people to make sure that there's nothing missed, because nobody knows your content better than you do. Nobody knows better than you which songs are yours and what share you own. Nobody knows better than you which artists have made recordings of those, right? And so we need to tap into your expertise and your knowledge to help get those things matched so we can pay you. Almost lastly, we pay royalties on a monthly basis. There is a time lag, however, from when that activity happens on a digital service. So for example, if there was a stream in the month of January, that ends up being paid on a royalty statement in mid-April. There's a lot that happens during the 75-day window. The service cannot even begin to start gathering the data until the whole month is finished. Based on the way the royalties work, they have to wait until all of the streams for the whole month have happened. Then they start compiling their data, calculating how much they owe us. We start taking a snapshot of our data at a certain time to try our matching for that month. We're always continually trying to match though, and trying to match it up and then calculate how much is due to our different members, get that set up to transfer to your banking account. So all that kind of stuff takes about 75 days in total. There's something called historical unmatched royalties. So we are really new. The MMA was passed in 2018, okay, the end of 2018. And over the next couple of years, the Copyright Office was involved in, putting out a proposal for the creation of a new organization to do this. There was a whole selection process, and then we had to hire a whole team. Our CEO started in January 2020. Oh yeah, and then COVID happened, but it did not slow us down. We hit the ground running. I was like one of the first 10 employees in. We're now over 100 employees. And this brand new blanket license, this new way of doing things, went into effect January 1st, 2021. So it's just over 2 years old. It's really very new. So what the law did, what the MMA did, was it said, remember the reason we got the MMA was because this is not working well in the first place, right? A lot of rights holders were not getting paid their royalties. They were really unhappy. They were really mad about it. And that's a lot of what led to the change in the law. What the MMA said to the digital music services was it said, hey, look, if when the MLC starts functioning, if you still have royalties that were under that work by work model, that date from like December 2020 and backwards, okay? If you've got royalties from December 2020 and back that you were not able to pay out, those are called historic unmatched royalties, historical unmatched royalties. They are from December 2020 and earlier. You can transfer all of that data and all that money to the MLC and avoid getting sued. So a lot of services took advantage of that option in the law. They transferred about $427 or so million to the MLC, about 4,000 data files, a lot of which were a hot mess, that go back in some cases 2007. And so if you never got your digital mechanical royalties, if you're like, I've had music up on services in the US for years and I've never gotten my digital mechanical royalties, we might have that money for you. And it's called historical unmatched money. It's from December 2020 and earlier. For sure, we have January 2021 forward, but we may also have that historical unmatched. We started paying out a lot of that money last summer. And we've been heavily working on matching. You can see it in that matching tool. You can see stuff in there. It's marked with an H to indicate like this goes back in time. And soon we'll be paying out even more of it. We're just waiting for an official ruling on the rates that we have to use. We're waiting on the courts for that ruling. But so this is there. So there's a whole web page dedicated just to this topic on our website that you can check out if you are interested. There will come a time in the future, we're not there yet, but there will come a time in the future where if you have not shown up and paid attention and claimed your share, that money is going to be paid out to all of the other rights holders who have, and you'll only be able to go back like 3 years in time. We're not there yet, and before we get there, we're going to scream it from like every rooftop you can imagine, be like, last call for money that's older than 3 years. We're not there yet. So right now, you haven't missed out on this. There will come a time where it'll be like you can go back 3 years, but anything prior to that was already paid out to everybody else because you didn't show up. We're not there yet, but just put that in the back of your mind. Okay, lastly, as you're starting to navigate this, if you're, we'll answer all the questions we can during the time we have. Shoot, we're almost out of time. Oh my God. But take this down. There's a phone number that we answer the phone. If you can believe it, we have a support team answers the phone 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. You can initiate an email request, email with us about something. And if you are a member and you're already logged into our portal, you can initiate a live chat during those hours as well. People are shocked, like we answer the phone. They're like, how that nobody does that, but we do. We answer the phone. And feel free to check us out on social media where we talk about upcoming webinars and all kinds of things. And we'll be yelling like, last call when we're ready for that. All right. Oh my gosh, that took forever. Okay, so let me come out of this because I have such a little time for questions. But let's get into it. And let me tell the people in my next meeting I'm gonna be a few minutes late so I can squeeze a few more minutes in here.
Right, all right. And if not, I'll get them to email the questions and we'll get them all answered some kind of way. First person did come in the chat and said, can producers also have a percentage of publishing on the master recording side?
Let's see here. Let me go back up to that question. Let me see, because I couldn't fully hear you, but it'll be also helpful if I read the question. Okay. So sorry, or do you want to say that again? Because I think there was a sound interference when you asked the question, because I'm trying to find it here.
All right, so the question was, can producers also have a percentage of publishing on the master recording side of artist songs?
So that statement, like, okay, I'm gonna put my professor hat on, that's like an A- question, because there's a little mistake in it. Yes, producers can get a writing share of the song. You don't get a writing share on a recording, okay? You get a writing share on the song, and often producers do end up being credited as one of the co-writers of the song, particularly if they contribute something. A lot of producers create all the music, right? Producers come in different flavors. Sometimes you have a producer with a rock band and all the producer is saying is like, hey, you played that a little fast, play it again a bit slower, right? In which case they're not writing anything. But in a lot of hip hop and pop records, the producer is writing a lot of the music, right? They're using a computer to do it, but they're writing the music, in which case they're taking that producer hat aside for a second, they're putting a songwriter hat on, and they are also acting as a songwriter and can agree with everybody else who also co-wrote that song, how they want to divide up that 100% between them. But absolutely. And in that case, being real technical about it, it's because they are a contributing writer. They may also happen to be the producer, great, but it's because they are acting as a writer. So yes, absolutely, they can get a share of the songwriting. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's say we got time for maybe 2 questions. First person raise their hand, they can get it. I'll jump on Instagram Live in like 5 minutes to answer any more questions if that works. So real quick, anybody got questions for Ms. Serrano while we have her? I could take 2 questions.
Me.
All right, Malcolm, come on, my guy.
Hello, how you doing?
Hi there. Hey.
So my question is, now I put out music and I've also put out different songs and I'm working on 2 projects. So I have a manager that works with me. And she told me to save up $500 some to get a license for my own brand as an autistic MC for autism, and also my organization called Autistic Game. So once I register the license, will I be able to own all my stuff, or how does that work out?
So that might take a bit longer to unpack because, I'm not entirely sure what she had in mind. Because people will say the word register, and sometimes they're talking about things like registering your song with your PRO, or registering the song with the MLC, or registering the sound recording with Sound Exchange, or registering the copyright with the Copyright Office. Those are all 4 examples of different kinds of registration, right? So I'm not entirely clear on what she means. What I can say is that, like, registering a song with your PRO or with the MLC or with Sound Exchange, 3 separate registrations, right? 2 of those are registering the song, 1 is registering a sound recording. Those are all free to do. When you register the copyright claim with the Copyright Office, that does cost some money. It's hard to tell of all those things what exactly the manager had in mind.
She meant like brand.
So
she meant like a licensed brand for like, so you can own all your stuff. So that way, if a label come knocking or somebody proposes you a deal, you can own you already have it in place so that it's your work. Something
but you
like
don't
that.
need to license your own work from yourself. The default is when you've created it, when you create a song and you create a recording, like let's say right now you went and you got on, Pro Tools or Logic, whatever, and an hour later you came out and you're like, here, check this out, right? When you did that, you just created a song and a recording. You did both at the same time. That's cool, but you did both.
Okay.
And you own it. You own the copyright, even if you never register that anywhere. As soon as you turn that into a Pro Tools file or Logic file or GarageBand file or whatever, you sang it on voice memo, just sang it. You now have created a copyrightable work and it is protected. You're not going to get your CMO money if you don't register that with those organizations, because that's how you get that money. And there are benefits to registering the copyright registration, which does cost a little money. There are benefits to doing that, which is probably a whole separate webinar, but you own it as soon as you've created it, full stop. Okay. So, so she might be, especially with that money amount, it might be thinking about copyright registration with the Copyright Office. There are benefits to doing that. It would not usually cost $500 though for like an album's worth. It's less than that. And that's a whole separate webinar that I'm sure can be scheduled in the future. But just do know this: you own it from right when you created it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Cool. Mr. Ron, you have time for one more?
One more.
All right, Denzel.
Hey, Denzel.
I had a question. I came late, so you might have already answered it in the webinar. But
you super low, Denzel. You super low.
Oh, all right.
You may need to get a little. If you're just have your laptop mic on, you may need to get a little closer to your computer.
Can you hear me a little better now?
Wait.
Yes, great.
Okay, I was on the speaker. I'm sorry, but I came a little late, so I might have missed what you said. But say I already have songs that are out, and I want to register them with the MLC. Is there a way for me to get all of them registered at one time, or would I have to go through and individually register them?
Yeah, no, we have a variety of tools. One of the ways is you can use a spreadsheet. You can set up that data in a spreadsheet for multiple, I think up to 300 at a time. And then you can upload the spreadsheet. There's a where'd you go? There you go. There's a very specific format to doing that, and our support team can help explain that format to you. But you don't have to type them in one by one on the website. You can upload a spreadsheet. And in some cases, because we had to get started and hit the ground so fast, the MLC did buy like a starter database, if you will, that had some starter data in it, so that for some people you don't have to type it all from scratch. Some of the basic stuff like might be in there, but you have to finish it and approve it. So some of your songs might even be in our database, but like incomplete, just waiting for you to come along and finish filling out the information and claim them, which also is less data entry for you to do. So absolutely, once you become a member, there's the spreadsheet, and there's also the like looking in our database, and if they're there and you just add 2-3 fields and click approve, it's much faster.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So listen, I hope this was super helpful. I'm so sorry that I ran out of time. I guess I was a little more long-winded than I planned to be. But our support team is happy to handle any questions, okay? That is their whole job all day. Like I wear like 30 hats and stuff. I don't sit around answering questions. That's all they do is answer questions all day, every day. So so they love to help you. They love it. That's what they live for. So please put them to work, okay? And thank you so much for having me. I love doing these. I look forward to coming back again in the future.
Thank you so much for coming, Miss
rock.
Serrano. We appreciate you so much.
Bye, everybody. Good luck. Get your
Bye.
CMO money.
Thank you.
CMO money. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, you guys. So I'm gonna stick around for an extra 5 minutes to answer some questions if you all still have them. So drop them in the chat. I'm gonna stop recording. Thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you again for the MLC. We'll see you on the next year's version.